All right, fellow Slayers, time for the second review of the day, which is The Dark Age. A man tries to get into the Sunnydale High School library to see Giles, but a demonic woman shows up and strangles him to death. He falls to the floor, and she turns into a puddle of green slime. At school, Buffy and Willow are playing the game Anywhere But Here, in which they recount some of their fantasies. Buffy's on a beach before sunset having her feet rubbed by Gavin Rossdale. Willow's in Florence at a restaurant eating ziti when she is joined by John Cusack. Giles tells Buffy to meet him later at the hospital where there will be a blood delivery, which attracts vampires. Giles runs into Jenny, who invites him for a date that weekend, a date that will involve them staying in. When the cheerful Giles gets back to the library, Detective Winslow is waiting for him. The dead man had Giles' address on him. Giles identifies the body as that of an old friend from London. The body has a tattoo on it, which Giles claims he can't identify. Shaken, Giles forgets to meet Buffy at the hospital, and she battles the vampires, who are disguised as doctors, alone until Angel shows up. She asks him to see that the blood gets to the hospital and goes to check on Giles. When Buffy goes to Giles' house to see what happened, he looks drunk and sends her away. He calls a friend in London and finds out that she's dead too. He crosses her name off of a list of several other names that have also been crossed off. He rolls up his sleeves and displays the same tattoo as his friend. Meanwhile, the dead friend Philip comes back to life in the morgue, his eyes flashing, and escapes. On Saturday, Willow, Xander, and Cordelia meet with Jenny Calendar for a computer class. Buffy shows up to express her concern about Giles' behavior. Cordelia mentions the police visit to the library. In the library, Buffy finds Ethan, who she recognizes as the costume shop owner and Giles' former friend, who had almost gotten her killed on Halloween. As she calls Giles, Ethan mentions the mark of Egon. Giles says she's in danger, and the dead Philip enters. A panicked Giles shows up and, after a scuffle which leaves Jenny unconscious, Philip turns into the green goo. Someone gets on Jenny and, when she comes to, her eyes flash. Will discovers the mark of Egon in a book. Egon the Sleepwalker possesses the body of a dead or unconscious host. They figure out that she's jumped from Philip's body to Jenny's. Jenny then tries to seduce Giles at his apartment. When he rebuffs her due to recent trauma, the demon changes her appearance and voice so that it's clear it is no longer Jenny, and attacks. Buffy comes to the rescue and the possessed Jenny jumps out the window. Giles explains to Buffy that he ran with a bad crowd when he was young, and they used being possessed by Egon as a temporary high, directing the demon into and out of each other's bodies. It was fed until Egon killed the friend he was possessing. At that point, Giles left the group. More recently, Egon killed the woman who killed Philip, and now it seems Egon is seeking out the rest of the group to kill too. Buffy goes to the deserted costume shop to try to help Ethan, but he knocks her out. He ties her up and puts the mark of Egon on her. He then pours acid on his own tattoo so that Egon will take Buffy instead of him. Jenny enters, now looking even more demonic, and approaches Buffy. The Slayer breaks free and starts fighting. Angel enters suddenly and chokes Jenny. Egon then leaves her but enters Angel's, since he's really dead, which happened to be Willow's plan all along. Egon fights Angel's demon and is beaten. Jenny returns back to normal, but Ethan escapes. Back at school, Jenny acts cold to Rupert, who thinks she'll never forgive him. Aww. So now let's take a look at some continuity surrounding this episode. This is the first episode to establish more about Giles' more wild youth, though it was foreshadowed by Ethan's comments about him in Halloween. Due to the events of this episode, Giles' and Jenny's relationship becomes strained to reconcile in Ted. In this episode, Giles slams the door in Buffy's face, and she does the same thing to him 6 years later at the end of the episode, Lies My Parents Told Me. Buffy will play Anywhere But Here years later in the comic issue of the same name. Xander's comment, "Nobody can be wound in straight and narrow as Giles with a dark side erupting," is a similar observation Anya will make about Willow in Smashed. This episode marks one of the first instances of Willow demonstrating leadership in the Scooby Gang in place of Buffy or Giles. She'll notably be in this position again in Bargaining Part 1. Xander refers to his Uncle Rory being a taxidermist. This is corroborated by Rory pointing out a poorly stuffed animal head in Hell's Bells. It's eventually demonstrated in Death and Consequences Part 3 that icon was never destroyed and survived by possessing a dead rat. Cordelia reads that one way to kill off a demon is to cut off its head. However, she'll learn that some demons, like Lauren, can be killed by decapitation. Ethan leaves Giles the message, "Be seeing you," the same one he did after he left in Halloween. Dun dun dun. So let's take a look at some pop culture references about this episode. Giles says, "And the rest is silence." The silence is from Shakespeare's Hamlet, and is also spoken in the Buffy the Vampire Slayer film by Buffy's previous watcher Merrick, and at the end of the film by Buffy herself. Excuse me. Buffy almost came up anywhere but here results in mentions of the singer Gavin Rossdale, the actor John Cusack, and Sanders' edition is the model actress Amy Yip. Buffy gets from Locker the book The Europeans by Luigi Barzini Jr. Giles lends Jenny Calendar first edition novel by British author E.M. Forster. Giles mentions that he's a fan of the 1970s band the Bay City Rollers. Buffy says to Giles, "I care for you from your long lost weekending in your apartment." The Lost Weekend is a movie about the effects of alcoholism on a man's life. Once again, Egon leaves a note saying, "Be seeing you." This phrase is likely a reference to the 1960s cult paranoid TV drama The Prisoner. After recovering her possession, Jane tells Giles, I'm not running around winding my hair. The hills are alive with the sound of music. Fine, but I'm coping." She's referencing the title song of the musical, The Sound of Music. A mimic poster can be seen in the movie theater. The music to which Buffy aerobicizes and Giles objects, despite being updated to a late 1990s techno idiom, quotes a prominent guitar riff from the musical Jesus Christ Superstar. The riff underscores the 39 lashes in the Trial Before Pilate, appears prominently in the overture, and opens the song Heaven on Their Minds, which is sung by the character Judas Iscariot, a role originated by Anthony Stewart Head's older brother Murray Head on the 1970 concept album of the musical. And now finally, let's take a look at some goofs surrounding this episode. After Buffy finds Ethan at the library and calls Giles, they are attacked by Philip Henry, who calls Ethan's name. The closed caption erroneously refers to Philip as a vampire. Wendy Way's character is spelled Diedre on Giles' paper, spelled Diedre in the credits. But Diedre in the credits. Will discovers the origin and the mark of Aegon, explaining that it's not Egyptian, it's Etruscan, mistaken for Egyptian by the design pattern, but any folk can see it predates their iconography. However, the Etruscan civilization's earliest records are dated to about 700 BCE, while the ancient Egyptian civilization came together around 3000 BCE. In other words, the Etruscans did not predate the Egyptians. I did not know that. So overall, I think this episode is kind of interesting, and we learn a little bit more about Giles' backstory, and yeah, I'm just happy that Giles and Jenny reconcile their relationship later on, but yikes. So yeah. So overall, I give The Dark Age 4 vampire steaks out of 5. Well, tune in as we take a look at the final episode of